Point.
Yep, and we are recording. It's all you.
All right, we're going to talk about SQL Server Configuration with Dba Tools and dbachecks. I'm Tracy Boggiano. I work for DocuSign. I have over 20 years of experience with SQL Server. I know I don't really look old enough for that, but it's true. You can find me at Twitter with my name, which is hard to spell. So you can go to databasesuperhero.com, pick up the spelling for it, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Just tell me where you've heard from me at so that I'll actually say yes, because there's too many people hitting me up on LinkedIn. I do a lot of different stuff. I'm just going to name a couple of things. I'm a North Carolina guardian ad litem, so I advocate for foster children in court. I got court tomorrow, which should be fun. And I volunteer for the Disability Rights of North Carolina on their mental health council to help protect the rights of people that have mental health illnesses. I'm also a speakingmentors.com member or founding member of that website. So we try to get people that are in the audiences out there speaking. George just started a blog, so eventually we'll get him speaking. So that's our next step. Everything else is just very colorful. And I do help run the Raleigh group. If you guys want to, join our Raleigh group and see more presentations, you can. We meet 3 times a month. We meet a lot. So now we'll talk about installing DBA tools and stuff. So one thing to note is if you install dbachecks, it by default installs Pester, which is what it uses behind the scenes to run tests. But it installs the newest version, which breaks everything in dbachecks. So you'll want to run this command, which will be in the files that have the code, so you don't have to copy it out of the presentation, to get version 4, so that it doesn't have version 5 and all the stuff breaks and you go, Tracy didn't know what she was talking about, it doesn't work. And then you can just run install module dbachecks, and it'll actually install DBA tools with it because it's a requirement. So a little bit about what Dba Tools is. It's an open source PowerShell module that was started by Chris Lemire over in Europe. It was developed by the SQL community, contributing to it. There's probably over 60 people that have contributed to it by this point, maybe 100. I don't know. There's a lot. There's over 100, 2, 3, 4, 500 commands in there. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. They're basically making this where it can replace SSMS. And you do everything in one line with PowerShell. Oh, see, look, 500 plus commands. And they've just released 1.1 version out there. So I'm sure that's went up since I made this thing. So one good way to see what commands are out there is you can do a get command with what module it is. This in no way represents how many commands there are. There is a website page for it, dbatools.io, and you can go to commands and get a longer list, and they're divided into sections, and you can jump down and see what things are and find things easier that way, because you can find all the stuff that's for AGs in one section, all the stuff that's for running backups in one section, all the stuff that's for SQL agent in one section. So I recommend checking that out as an easy way to find the commands that you may want to use. So more about what dbachecks is, because that's going to be mostly what we're using to check things out as we use DBA tools to fix what dbachecks is saying is wrong. So again, open source PowerShell module. Guess what? Developed by the SQL community. Not as many people contributed to it because it's a much smaller module. It was created by Rob Sewell, who actually contributed to DBA tools as well. And it checks your SQL Server for the default configuration that's configured in dbachecks. There is a way to change part of the configuration, which we will see when I go through the demos. And it provides the output to PowerBI or to a table or to a JSON file. The PowerBI is actually just reading a JSON file into it, so it can make it pretty, so you can show it to your manager that you fixed all this stuff up and that there's nothing wrong with the server. And it uses DBA tools in the background if the functions are only testing SQL Server stuff to retrieve values to be tested. And we mentioned earlier the framework for testing that it uses is another PowerShell module named Pester, and you'll have to make sure you get the right version or everything breaks. And you'll think Tracy's crazy for telling you to use it. So these are literally all the commands it has. It has very few commands. Again, you use the get command to see what it is. So you don't really have to do very much in here to run your setup and know what you're doing and stuff, because you can see the bottom one is write dbc table, so that's how you would get it to a table. And we will be using very few functions in here to run our stuff, because we just don't need that many to do what we're going to do. So if you run a get dbc check, this shows you all the different things that it can check. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but like you can check that your database smell is enabled, whether you have a database operator, mail operator set up on there, a fail-safe operator, just in case, something doesn't go through. You want to check that your job owner is actually, SA or not SA if you're being security compliant. You want to check that your job history is set up correctly, and so forth and so forth. So it goes on down, and it's very, very, very long list of things it can check. This is a command you run to just check everything on a machine. I have set up certain tags that I exclude because I'm not using certain things like query store and things like that, so that it runs a little bit faster, because it takes a little while to run. So there will be pauses in this presentation where we hopefully take questions, even though there's only like 3 or 4 of you. But otherwise I'll just blabber on about something. And then once you run the commands, you hit refresh and you see what it looks like. Now this is what it looked like by default when I first started giving this presentation. There would be 126 failed items. It has actually changed since then. I think we're down to 121, which I have no idea why it's changed. I don't know. Just don't know. But it has. And that is all the slides. So now we'll go into demos. DM is up. See, it's 121 now. So the main thing that we're showing here is agent alerts. So, and part of it's going to be database mail and things like that we're going to set up, because that's going to be part of fixing it. So we're going to go through and fix those first, because that'll give us the biggest bang for our buck. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clear the bottom stuff where I went ahead and updated Dba Tools and dbachecks, so we can see what we could just break today, because, who knows what they changed that isn't going to work. So we're going to set some properties in here so that we can use them later on. We're going to set our database mail account just to be DBA mail, our account, what email address, because, I don't want it coming to me, so I didn't set my real email address in there. And where we want our alerts to go. Then we're going to use those to actually set the config, and that's the command I was telling you before, that you can set different config values, and that's what it would test against. And this is when we were doing the DBC, when we did the get DBC config, we could see what those profiles were set to. So now we're actually going to set them. And then we can actually see what they're actually set to, just for fun and giggles. If somebody had their phone on or something, because I'm getting a little bit of feedback with but we can see that database mail is set, URL mail is set, the DB operator set the DBA, something like, so we've got those settings set. Now, there's a little bit of stuff that I probably should have checked to see if they added these to 1.1, but they just released it a couple of days ago, so I didn't have time. So we're going to get a server instance from Dba Tools, because we're going to need to do a little bit of SMO to set up some stuff to do some things later on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn our database mail on, because that was one of the things that was failing. And you can tell here from the previous value, it was set to 0. Now it's set to 1, so it definitely was turned off. Then we're going to set us up a database mail account. Again, these are one-liners, and I have set these up so they're rerunnable. So if it doesn't exist, you can run it again on the server. So this is made to be able to, you go in here and change this and set it up and run it on your servers multiple times if you need to. Then we're going to set up a mail profile, and this is where we've got a little bit of SMO to get our database mail profile set and our job server alert set to what we need it set to. They didn't have a function for that at the time. They may have one now. I actually think I wrote this one to add a new database operator because they didn't have that at the time. So we're going to add us a database operator. So now we have an operator we can send mail to. A little bit more SMO to give us a fail-safe operator and a notification for that based on our profile. Then we actually need alerts. That was the main part that was at the top of the report, was that we had no alerts at all, you know. So I like to do severity 16 through 25. I know some people only do 19 through 25. And it can be a lot of noise. At work our work now we don't send any alerts off our servers. We have completely different things. But there are creating new functions for doing this, so they may have already created these. I've seen these in tickets, so but right now it's SMO, and I probably need to go check those out as well. But we're just going to do a for each around those and create them. And then we like to have some errors around our memory and corruption and stuff, so we're going to create those as well. Then we're going to wait for this report to take forever to run. Sometimes it takes up to 2 minutes to run. And this is where I'm going to beg you for questions or see if anybody has any questions at this time. Just that.
To answer your question, we had somebody come in and out of the meeting a couple times, I think is what you were hearing, the beeping.
Okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't going to, keep going over the recording. So
yeah,
just kept hearing beep, beep, beep. I was like, what is that? Yeah, and this notification here is because I'm not using failover clustering, so don't worry about that. Sorry, did you have a question?
Well, while nobody's asking the question, I was just going to mention we use the Dba tools to do our backup testing, where we restore, run dbcc, and remove the databases.
Yep, they have a dbcc command now, if you didn't know that. They keep adding stuff left and right. I need to go through this presentation and see if they've added stuff that I've made notes to write myself. Or at least put in tickets, because they've gotten it to where they have under 200 tickets, which is like the lowest they've been in a really long time. Really, Chrissy actually put that on Twitter. So she was very proud of that number. Because their backlog is so, with bugs and new features and things like that is pretty intensive. So we were at, I don't know, 221. Now we've gotten down to 82. So that was the biggest part of what we got. So, setting up database mail and alerts is one of the biggest things you got to do on a server most of the time, especially if that's where you get all your learning from. So our next biggest thing that we'll take care of is all the Hologram scripts. I know some people don't use them. I like them. So you do have the option to turn these off so that it doesn't check for them. So if you don't use them, don't worry about the fact that it's going to flag it on the report. You can use the set dbc check to say, hey, I don't want to check for all the scripts. But if you love them to death, you can make sure that they exist. So, well, maybe not to death. We don't want to die over. So now back over to demos. And they're really easy to install. They've made it where as long as you have an internet connection, you can install it just with one thing. Otherwise, you got to download the file and put in a location and tell it to install. So I'm just going to set my properties again, tell it to clean up after a week, I think it is, and tell it what my email operator is. And you can install it, tell it you want to log to a table, install the jobs, the whole solution. And if you do replace existing, it will redo the jobs and everything. So that's kind of a thing you got to watch out for. You may or may not want to do that if you already have it installed. But if you have access to the internet on the server that you're running it from, it will automatically download it from GitHub and send it up. If you're in an isolated environment because of security, which I happen to be at in one company I work for, you have to download the file and tell it the file location, and then it will install it. So you can, either way, you can automate the install. Look how fast that was. Now, we need schedules because, we have jobs, but they're not set to run. So I've made up some schedules, and I made different types of schedules because some of the parameters are a little bit different, and to give you kind of a taste on how they work and feel. So I've got like a nightly midnight job, one that goes Monday through Friday for midnight for diffs, a Saturday at midnight, every 15 minutes, Saturday at 2 a.m. for some stuff, Saturday at 10, and then a midnight job for all the weird ones. And I put some of these in an array, like the different ones that purge out different things and clean up things, because they don't, it doesn't really matter when they run. They don't need separated schedules like some of this other stuff doesn't. It doesn't really need to be spread out. So we'll run those and get us a whole bunch of job schedules. And it's set up to notify if it fails and all that good stuff. Now we're going to actually, for any job that has an instance where it doesn't have an operator email, we're going to set it to email the DBA operator that we had set up at the top as a parameter. So like these jobs automatically don't have anybody to email if they fail. So we're going to do any job on there that happens to be null, which that will cover these jobs, and we don't have any other jobs, so there's no reason not to do that. We can get more specific if you want to on the equal clause. I'm going to set my model database to full recovery mode to cover running a backup, so you can see what a full backup runs like later. And part of the checks that's running is making sure that you do have full backups and that you've run integrity checks on your system. So we're going to tell it, to go through our jobs and actually run those for those two jobs. Because, we need stuff like that, right? And then hopefully that won't run too long, so it won't show up on the report, which it shouldn't because it's, baby databases right now. And we'll rerun it and see what our report looks like. I feel like I'm going fast. I am going fast. I talk fast sometimes. Sorry, guys. Y'all might get some of your evening back. Sometimes this takes an hour, but I've been known to do it in like 45 minutes. But this is feeling like a 40-minute presentation at this point. Plus, I usually get more questions. So.
I'll ask a question. You were installing the OLA scripts.
Yes.
We don't install them to master, which I think is where it goes by default. Is that correct?
Yes. There is a parameter where you can tell it what database to go to.
Okay, cool. That
You
was
just gotta type database and put it into like the DBA database or whatever database you happen to put your special stuff into.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I just didn't create a DBA database because I was lazy. Because I normally don't put stuff like that in master either. Because then the command logs in there and it might get big. And I think we were down to 81 last time, so I always forget the numbers. But we should see that we dropped significantly down this time. Now we're not going to fix all the errors, by the way, because I didn't get around to fixing all of them. Just some warning. But now we're down to 26. Yay for us. See, I'm not on a domain, so we're not going to fix that for sure. Yeah, so some of these we're not going to fix. But now we're down to 26, so we're going to go through and clean up a few more things because yeah, I talked fast and we didn't get. And there's some extra things I'm going to tell you that you can do with dba tools as well. So one of the things we're going to do is turn on optimize for ad hoc workloads so that you don't have your buffer cache getting filled with, or your plan cache getting filled with ad hoc queries and stuff, because that just fills it up when you don't need it. I've never heard of anybody having an issue with this since it's been introduced in 2008. So I always make sure that's turned on. Then we're going to turn on remote admin connections, which is your DAC, so that if anything really bad happens to your system, you can still connect to your server with limited resources and do a tiny amount of troubleshooting at least. Because that just should be turned on. I don't know why it's not a default by Microsoft. If you're not having problems with CPU, I recommend turning on backup compression just because it gives you the access to compress your backups, save space. Then we keep remote access turned on as well for different reasons as well, because that's one of the things it requires. Then there's more community tools you can actually install using the dba tools like SQL is active. If you don't know what this is a great store procedure for telling you what's going on. It replaces SP2 and SP2 to tell you what's going on with the server. It tells you what's running now, what's happens to be open. We used to have a job at one company where we threw the data that was the active data in there every 5 minutes into a table and then cleaned it up after a week, because it gave us enough data to do some troubleshooting, because we didn't, that was before like Restore was around and things like that. So you can have that automatically installed into whatever database you wanted to install it into so that you have it for troubleshooting. Again, it's like all the scripts, it just pulls it right off the internet. If you like print scripts, there are a few errors it throws when it installs, but it still actually installs. It installs, a number of scripts that are helpful. The one I like the most is the Blitz index script, because it helps you with troubleshooting your indexes. There is a SP Blitz that actually will go through and tell you the basics of your configuration and tell you if there's something off with that as well. So that's, pretty neat as well. That it's fixed it. Yay, the errors are fixed. Last time I ran that, it just spits like errors and it still works. Well, it says status error, but it was used to be yellow when it did it. I wonder if it installed. They all say error. Then there's this tool called SQL Watch that is a free tool for monitoring your system or systems. I haven't had a chance to use it, but it runs on PowerBI or Grafana. I think he switched it over to Grafana recently. So you can actually use this to run set up a system that's monitoring your system. I know someone that's actually using it to monitor systems for a city that happens to be near me. because I recommended it and they like it. So that's the only endorsement I got of it. So I haven't installed it myself and used it just because I haven't had the need for it or a big enough environment to use it to be able to recommend it. You can run Glen Allen Berry scripts from here too as well, and I've actually got that command down below. One thing to note on Glen Allen Berry scripts, he actually has notebooks for those. If you're familiar with Azure Data Studio, I would recommend downloading the notebook and running those. I will have a forthcoming blog on how to automate that running against multiple servers because I have set that up at my newest job. And that way you can, instead of having individual files for every query, it would all be in one giant file. So you can just scroll down. That would be my recommendation for running his scripts. The only gotcha is it doesn't capture query plans. So if you need something that can go out and capture query plans, then you go back in here and you would use this to run it and let it capture query plans for you. But if you just need the basic scripts and the data that doesn't have query plans, then I would recommend just using the notebooks that he's created. They're pretty cool. Now, the reason I set my MSDB to full last time is so I could turn on my query store and let it collect some data. Now, there's recently been a command for testing query store to see if it's correct. So we will actually add that, ad hoc because, typing in demos is fun. Gus wrote this, so. Yeah, I messed it up. But you could run this against a database and make sure it has the correct configuration, and I didn't type it right. Oh, come on. Now I want to know what the command is, because I remember reading about it. I don't mind if I try to look it up for you. It's got to be on their website. In 1 minute, I promise I will stop looking for it. Oh, I swear I remember reading about it. Oh, I'll have to find that. I'll look for it. So I know it was right. For security reasons, you really shouldn't have your SA account named SA or even enabled because, that's an easy way for people to find your stuff. So we're going to disable it and rename it. We're going to pray it actually works this time because most of the time it fails. And they have renamed the parameters on it. Let's see if set works. Does that work instead? Yeah. Last time I did it, it didn't work at all. So then we're going to change the auto growth. The only way I could find to change the auto growth settings from being like 1% or 10% in 1 megabyte was to use this weird looking query up here. Go for each and find all this stuff. I wrote the pretty part down here though, so you can actually read it. For funds results. So we're just going to run that file to fix the auto growth settings that were at the top. Then we're going to look at some turning on trace flags and stuff. So this trace flag turns off writing all your backups to your event log, because that your logs and stuff, because that just comes cumbersome. For some reason, trace flags are defined weirdly in dbachecks, so you have to tell it to turn off 117 because it's the default in 2019, so you don't want it to expect it. But for 118, you gotta tell it to skip checking it because it's the default in 2019. So I don't know, it needs to be named the same so it's not confusing at all. And soon we set the dbc config to say, hey, we want this stuff. We're going to enable our trace flag 3226 because that's the trace flag we want actually enabled, and we don't want those enabled because I'm on 2019. Now, if I was on 2019, you would set those differently, and you might have other trace flags you want for whatever reason because of support. You could add them in here to say, these are what I'm expecting and not expecting and stuff like that. And then you can go through and enable. Then we're going to set our max stop, which, by the way, on my machine, I only have 2 CPUs, so it's still going to test like it doesn't work. But I wanted it in the demo. Then we will run our report again. And then we'll just go through some stuff that's interesting. Just to let you know some other stuff that you can do in here as far as making sure your servers are set up, correctly and things like that. They have, like I said, a whole bunch of stuff you can do. Just, it's amazing the amount of stuff they've managed to stick in here over the years. And they just keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Any more questions? This runs.
Hey, quick question, and I might have missed this in the beginning, but what format is the file that the output from running the disk?
It writes to JSON,
Okay,
and then the PowerBI picks it up and reads it out of the JSON file.
all right, so it's just stores a text file, so you could copy it anyway.
Yeah. It just has a default path it puts it in. I'd have to remember where that's at.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's documented on the dbachecks GitHub page.
Thanks.
Where it hides it, so to speak. Well, you can do it. You can do it. So this is what I'm used to. Is it taking forever? Because sometimes when I give this presentation, it seems like it takes like an hour to do this part. And I do it so many times, it's like, please stop taking forever. Please. Well, why is taking forever? We can go ahead.
I'm surprised the cat hasn't crawled across her keyboard yet.
I know she's somewhere hiding. She's not in the window. But we can go in and see all those jobs have been created. We can see we have our alerts. We can see our operator's been created. So we can see that it actually did all the stuff I said it did. Well, almost all the stuff I said it did. I didn't show you everything I said it did. But you can tell that it's, working. And it spits out errors if things aren't working. What, is it stuck or something? I don't know. Mm. Mm. I hit control break, so let's see what happens. I get anything. I was afraid it was stuck. May have to run it again, and then I'll just go through what's down here. I didn't. It looks stuck. It's never taken that long before. Okay, that still got 2 autographs. I think that's fine. Yeah, that looks like it did it all. It just didn't. We'll let it run again while we go over the extra stuff that I have put down here, just in case. Just so you can see how much was left out of the other stuff. So another thing you can do is set your power plan on your database server, just in case, it's not set to high performance. Because, that's still an issue these days. You can set your cost threshold for parallelism to something besides 5, because that's like a SQL 7 bottom of the basement setting. So I usually start at least with 25, sometimes go up to 50. This is how you can invoke Glen Allen Berry's scripts and export it to the temp directory, which I can show you because there's probably loads of times I've done it and not deleted it. See? Loads of times I didn't delete it. But again, I would recommend his notebook if you're not looking to get the query plans, because then you would have it all in one thing and put in Azure Data Studio and let it run. So it's just an easier way to do it. And there's a way to actually run a notebook in PowerShell. Just don't run his notebooks without taking the spaces out, because it will not run a notebook that has spaces. I had to contact someone at Microsoft to figure that out. I only contacted Julie, so that's it. She would know the answer. It's like, why doesn't Glenn stuff run? No wonder his stuff isn't pop. He tweeted one time that his notebooks weren't popular. I'm like, yeah, because no one can automate it running. So I hit refresh, not that. And we got it down to 24, so we'd have to change the jobs over to a valid owner. The database growth is an event, so that means at some point it grew, and it thinks it's going to grow soon. And I don't know why the fellow said, and again, the max stop saying it's there. The last agent job run, and I'm not in an active directory, so there's a number of these things that will test positive just because of how my instance is set up. So we fixed a great majority of the things coming for 121. So the other thing that's kind of neat is you can do database compression here, and you can set up what percentage if it saves you 25%, hey, compress it. send it to a CSV file, doing a pin. That way I know all the databases and servers I did, and start saving you some space on your databases if you haven't been using database compression. Where I work, we put compression on everything. We don't even do it by whether it saves us space. We just stick it on there. And one last thing, I don't do this so that it doesn't mess up my demo machine, is you can install cumulative updates automatically from a directory. You can download it from temp, or you can tell it to download it to your ctemp directory, and it'll download the newest cumulative update for whatever version of SQL and install it. And there's more examples on how to do this. Again, you can use your Git help on any command and do dash examples and see what it's doing. And it'll give you different examples of how to do that. Extract it into your temp directory. You know, you can specify a particular version that you want. You can put it into a network share if you want to. So you don't have to do it a certain way. So those are different things that you can do with it. So those are, that's all I have as far as doing stuff. Again, I have the commands for installing things up here in the demo0 file, and just going through some commands that we went through inside of the first part of the PowerPoint presentation are in here, and getting help on the commands and different types of help you can get. And it can even try to access Get help online, which I find sometimes doesn't really do anything. So, but all this is available on my website with the presentation if you need to download it, or I can give it to George to put up wherever you guys put stuff up as well.
Yes, if you don't mind, we'll put it out as well. And we'll
Okay.
have this video posted on YouTube as well.
Okay, that's fine. It can be in multiple places as it grows. But yeah,
I'll tell you,
that's oh, sorry.
the install updates, the CUs has been fantastic. We've built a script that we tell it which CMS group we want to point at.
Mm-hmm.
And but we download all of our CUs to a folder where we point it to. That way, if we don't want to install one, we just don't put it in there. Even if it sees that it needs it, it won't install it if we don't want to install it yet.
Yep. I've recently started doing a lot of work with the CMS server because my one side of my company doesn't use CMS servers, and they have it automated a different way. They don't use Dba Tools. And my other side of the company, I talked them into using Dba Tools. So I'm automating everything using their CMS server, and they're loving it. Because they didn't know Dba Tools could do that. They're like, you can do that with one line of code. I have like 15 lines of code doing that.
Oh yeah.
So we're doing a lot with the CMS servers because we're only implementing all of Hologram's backup parts for the scripts. So I'm doing that via scripts and stuff. So we've got that. I've got that almost automated we're using that for our FedRAMP stuff. And then I had to copy the schedule out of the original because they were using maintenance plans. So I had to copy the schedule out of the maintenance plans ones so that it would be scheduled in the same time frame and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a fun process. So, but yeah, I got done a little bit early, so I was talking fast and stuff. So I noticed that, like, two pages in of demos. It's like, slow down.
Well, now when Doug listens to it, he won't be able to put it on 1.5 speed.
I listen to everything at 2 speed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm nutty.
Yeah, my mind's not that quick.
It's fun. Well, I'll stop sharing and I will send you the zip file. I'm going to write that down as a to-do list item because I'll forget if I don't write it down.